Hiya, I'm Slingman. In this video, I want to take a deep dive into Terezi's various coin flips in Act 5, and what they can tell us about herself, Dave, Vriska, luck, determinism, gods, doom timelines, and a whole lot more besides. I hope you enjoy. Before we can start, I'll give a refresher on some of the themes I'll be addressing in the analysis. Vriska and Terezi have a long and complicated history. Super basic refresher on their relationship from Hivebent. Vriska is obsessed with being highly competitive, competent, ruthless, and self-centered, as influenced from childhood by Troll Society, her Lucis, and Mindfang's diary. She has a penchant for flip-flopping between megalomaniacal ranting and cynical obsequiosity, as she doesn't really care whether people regard her as a terrifying villain or in a more positive light. Good or bad, she just wants to foster strong reactions to feel relevant and important. Vriska and Terezi's rivalry / relationship throughout Hivebent is complex and layered. Initially, they played Flarp together, where they were each indomitable. But Vriska was always jealous of Terezi's ability to, quote, dismantle teams of Flarpers with nothing but politics and head games, unquote. Whereas Vriska had to rely on the cheat of her psychic mind control powers. Vriska has no qualms about cheating, but it's obvious this bruised her ego somewhat, and it carries forward into the present events of Homestuck. To cut a very long story short, Vriska cruelly paralyzed Tavros, causing Aradia to summon the spirits of Vriska's murder victims to haunt her, causing Vriska to mind control Solux to kill Aradia, causing Terezi to blow off Vriska's arm and eye, causing Vriska to find a convoluted way to blind Terezi, a few years after which the story of Hivebent takes place. During Hivebent, Terezi and Vriska have an uneasy agreement to put aside their vicious competitive tendencies in order to allow for a somewhat stable friendship and for themselves and their friends to not end up hurt or dead. But it's pretty clear that their relationship has a deep need for this kind of competitive behavior, so it rings as somewhat empty. They are addicted to the drama and danger they bring out in each other, and when that's gone, there's a hole in their souls that manifests in Vriska very clearly, but doesn't obviously start to affect Terezi until much later. Jumping to after Tavros is paralyzing during a conversation between Terezi and Aradia, we learn that Terezi views Vriska as her responsibility, as she tries to dissuade Aradia from retaliation. If Aradia punished Vriska, it would merely be revenge, whereas in Terezi's case, she believes it would be a cold, logical dispensation of justice. The framework that guides Vriska's actions is an ever-fungible, cynical personal morality that can be twisted into any shape possible to justify what she already wants to do, making her a perfect foil for Terezi's idea of objective, ironclad justice. It's worth noting though that despite the endless ink she spills on rationalization and justification, she is very obviously racked with deep guilt about what she did to her friends. After Tavros' maiming, Terezi struggles with the idea of bringing Vriska to justice. She knows it's the right thing to do, but doesn't want to because it would mean losing the most interesting part of her life, and on some level she does love her, either as a friend, rival, or more, or any or all of the above. Vriska thrashes back and forth between intimidation, daring Terezi into action, and ingratiating apologies, probing for any crack in Terezi's emotional armor. Whatever morality profile she can adopt to have the desired effect on Terezi is the one she will broadcast. Terezi has always been the better mind reader though, so it doesn't work out. Okay, I went a bit deep into the weeds there, but these nuances in Vriska and Terezi's history are important for later. Dave. I could write about 50 videos on this smug little tool, but I'll give you the spark notes for this one. There is a symbol that recurs over and over with Dave, the broken and unbroken sword. This is a symbolic language that represents Dave's relationship to the idea of capital H heroism, something that his parental figure Bro tries to instill in him from a very young age. Put briefly, the unbroken sword represents the masculine, stoic, martially adept hero who represses his feelings and personhood in order to achieve self-sacrificial and/or violent feats. It's closely linked to Dave's childhood trauma experience when under Bro's custody. During the comic, Dave struggles frequently with the heroic mold Bro tried to impose on him. The broken sword is the subversion of this path. It's an ineffective weapon, but represents the messy, flawed, and ultimately more human person Dave would become should he deviate from his Bro's iron mold. One who could allow himself to understand his emotions and psyche and forge his own path away from Bro's shadow. There's simply too much from the text that substantiates this to cover, but consider how Bro's sword is named Unbreakable Katana, or the sequence with Dave extracting Kaledvolch from the stone. If you need more convincing, seriously, just read the comic. This stuff is super obvious when you're looking out for it. In Homestuck's metaphysics, every choice branches a timeline, but not all are alpha and the rest are doomed. The main idea of the alpha timeline is that it is a timeline in which Lord English is summoned, and paths deviating from this are doomed. The validity of a given timeline is closely linked to narrative privilege. We only ever see the alpha timeline and doom timelines that directly contribute to it, i.e. we never smash cut to a doom timeline that doesn't affect the alpha in some way. More generally, Homestuck is a story of the alpha timeline and nothing else, and therefore the story of Homestuck is very precisely the story of Lord English's summoning. happening. Therefore, the instinctive reading of Doom timelines as a metaphysical answer to a paradox, i.e. a solution to the grandfather paradox, is not the whole story. It is called paradox space after all. Paradoxes can thrive. Okay, final bit of preamble. The Lemonsnout sequence is mostly fun and cute, but there's one important thing to note here. Lemonsnout gets a favourable flip but still ends up hanged. This sets up further exploration of luck and its irrelevance or subversion. Luck, and Terezi and Vriska's relationship to the concept, is closely related to their ideas of free will, justice and determinism. One might assume that luck is determinism's opposite, but as we will see shortly, it isn't quite that clear cut. Alright, let's finally get stuck in. The subtext of these lines is that this is pretty much what Vriska did with John, since he didn't know he had to die and forfeited his decision. In that sequence, Vriska came off as patronizing, protecting John from the knowledge of his death, whereas Terezi here makes Dave stare the decision in the face while teasing him about it. She's almost daring him to do it, which Dave correctly interprets as additionally cruel since she already knows what's going to happen. Dave's indecision is symbolically paired with broken, unbroken sword imagery. This self-sacrifice would obviously be associated with the unbroken sword, so he lengthens the sword in preparation for the deed. Killing an innocent, sleeping version of yourself is a psychological point of no return and connects with the ego death and martiality of the unbroken sword part. With the setup prior in Dave's arc, we have an idea what his decision might be. We learn that Dave trying to god tier has more to do with him whining about wanting to know more about it and less about Terezi's insistence that he should catch up with John. Previously in Act 5 Act 2, Vriska latching onto John and Terezi talking to Dave had the subtext of each troll continuing their rivalry by proxy, by seeing which chosen human could end up more powerful. This detail tilts the scales in favour of Terezi and Dave's friendship being more natural and less about Terezi's competitive mind games with Vriska. It also clues us in that Dave is still struggling with intense anxiety about not living up to Bro's heroic model. Is Terezi simply antagonizing him by pushing his troller buttons, or is she genuinely trying to make Dave understand the full ramifications of what he's about to do to help him make the best choice he can? As is standard for Terezi, it's probably a little bit of both. Terezi is very notable in that she is a character who almost permanently has her mask on, and we see glimpses of what she's truly thinking extremely rarely, at least in the first half of the comic. Contrast this to other masked characters like Dave, who constantly lets his neuroses bear in long rambling monologues, or Vriska, who is prone to fits of rage that expose deep insecurity, and Terezi's relative control and poise is obvious. The Coinflip is a performative ritual of agency that still remains loaded because a pre-flip assignment decides which Dave gets to be real. The flip is symbolically violent, especially with Terezi's ties to Two-Face and the execution of Lemonsnout. It creates a doomed Dave who wouldn't have existed otherwise. Terezi forces Dave into a situation with complex agency. Dave has already killed his alternate self by dooming him by choosing correctly. On some level, Terezi realizes that Dave wants the illusion of being forced to do something. It absolves him of the difficulty and pain of making his own decisions and connects with his fatalistic streak as well as all the bro stuff. A soldier needs a general. But Terezi won't let him off the hook and forces him to stew in his indecision. Later on, we see Dave's sentiment echoed in Dirk's conception of himself as an irredeemable monster and how that rationalization absolves him of the complication and messiness of the fact that he's just a person who needs to try hard to be good like everyone else. Terezi believes that Paradox Space has a sense of justice and karma, but what moral crime did Doomed Dave commit to become doomed, choosing good heads? Alpha Dave is more like a janitor mopping up the garbage of something that threatens the timeline's coherence, working in the name of Paradox Space itself. He is a knight of time after all. He uses violence in the name of time, i.e. timeline coherence. Paradox Space might enforce some sense of justice, but its court is corrupt and arbitrary. Quick interjection. Immediately prior to the sequence, god tiers were introduced with John. The death and resurrection of the hero is an extremely common touchstone in hero's journey type stories, but just pointing that out isn't very interesting. What is interesting is how John's example relates to the rest of the cast. John is kind of like the blueprint of a normal Spur player. He happily runs around his land, talks to his consorts and does his quest like a good boy, and eventually hits his big hero turning point that coincides with unlocking his latent potential and his wind powers. This is shown in full in order to provide a template for how things are supposed to go so it can be broken apart later. Terezi wasn't really offering Dave an outside hand that could change his path. She just offered him awareness of his own fork in the road, appropriate for a seer of mind. She doesn't want to needle and press him to kill his sleeping alt self and become a god. She wants him to sit and stew with that decision. As Terezi knows firsthand from her own failure to god tier, being a god means being the kind of person who can annihilate the self for the highest sake. And Dave simply isn't ready, nor do we expect here he ever will be. He just doesn't want to be that kind of person. The irony here is that in his rejection of the capital H heroic self-sacrifice that is supposed to transform one into a full hero god, he actually hits the lowercase h heroic high point of his arc thus far by insisting into Paradox Space's face that this is not who he wants to be. Terezi's scheme is successful and Dave becomes a stronger person in a way that actually matters. These kinds of subversions are the reason why me earlier glibly pointing out that heroes' journey stories frequently feature heroic self-sacrifice and resurrection is necessary. The final nail in the coffin for Dave's metaphysical footing is that Terezi didn't even look at the coin at all. It's not just that the timeline was split specifically as a consequence of Dave's decision and not the randomness of the coin flip, but the entire deterministic apparatus is irrelevant, and therefore any argument that the physical reality holds precedent over the conceptual. Dave's mention of Schrödinger invites us to consider both doomed real Dave and unbroken broken sword Dave as a wave function that just collapsed. This metaphor holds implicit that it could have realistically gone either way. Including quantum mechanics into this hodgepodge of themes and ideas actually dovetails quite nicely with the idea that the conceptual holds precedent over the physical. Under popular interpretation, it is purely the act of observation that collapses a wave function and causes a quantum object to assume a particular state. It's a little too much to ask that Hussey get quantum mechanics exactly right, so we're just going to go with this. This scene ends with a concise summary of one of the conclusions we take from both of these coin flips. Luck doesn't actually matter. In both of these circumstances, the result of what actually occurred isn't influenced at all by the actual result of the coin. Luck is, of course, a Vriska coded concept as of now, so it's safe to assume she wasn't far from Terezi's mind during the preceding philosopher-wankery. What a perfect transition to the final fateful coin flip I'll be discussing today. Terezi gambles with Vriska on a flip coin to either stay with the trolls on the meteor or go fight Jack herself. Implied in stay is that Terezi will kill her, and implied in go is that Vriska will be dooming everyone as Jack can track her back to the meteor. But as we know, Vriska has luck powers and can easily force a favourable flip. So what's the psychology in play here that Scratch mentions? Well, Vriska is betting on Terezi being unable to kill her, and Terezi is trying to outsource her own potential guilt of killing her to the determinism of Vriska's decision to rig the coin flip. On some level, Vriska wants to say goodbye to Terezi. She wants her to fail at killing her, not only obviously because she would remain alive, but to confirm her doubts about Terezi and finally win their long mind game over who can be more ruthless and brutal. She's consistently been jealous of Terezi's ability to understand minds and decisions, and by gambling that she wouldn't kill her and winning, she'd be beating her at her own game. God-tiering has fed her megalomaniacal side and inclined her into wanting to finally put to rest her infatuation with Terezi. She feels as if to truly become the ultra-capable, emotionless adult troll she wants to become, she has to discard the closest relationships she formed as a child. Furthermore, she's trying to prove her salt as the optimal troll by disregarding the compunction of inevitably causing all of her peers to die, for the benefit of an attempt at fighting an impossible adversary. This is catalyzed by her doubts about this view of her life she shared with John shortly before. Each time Vriska flip-flops over an issue, it's more and more extreme. Back to Terezi and coins though. By rigging the situation such that Vriska has to make the conscious choice to manipulate the coin flip, Terezi intends to outsource the blame for her backstabbing of Vriska to Vriska herself, and maybe feel less morally tainted by the whole thing. We can assume this wouldn't really work though. As Vriska has proven many times over, you just can't cheat away that kind of guilt. And as expected, Terezi on the meteor after the sequence is depressed and racked with regret. Even though Terezi pays lots of lip service to justice and comeuppance, she's still a scared, confused kid who just doesn't want to end the life of the person closest to her in the world. And at the end of the day, the coin still only ever flipped on one side, preserving this running theme of luck being secondary to the thoughts and decisions of people in Homestuck's universe. I hope you enjoyed the video. My next one will concern the thematic connections between Homestuck and Deltarune. If you're a Deltarune fan, you might have heard that you need to read Homestuck to understand it. I don't think this is true at all, but I don't really know of a long-form piece of writing that goes deep into the weeds of Homestuck, retrieves some of its more profound themes and ideas, and applies that to Deltarune, as most seem to just cover the short references or surface-level connections. Don't expect it anytime soon though. The 4th year of my master's degree in chemistry has begun in earnest, and it's pretty fucking brutal, so yeah. Thank you very much for watching.